Thank you.
I'm going to call a meeting to order. It's a little after 1 p.m. on May the 8th. And first thing we're going to have is a Pledge of Allegiance. Oscar Gonzalez, you want to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Who's got the radio?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Oscar. Okay, Mr. Garber.
Yes, sir.
Were there any actions to report out of closed session?
Yes, sir.
In closed session, the board took action to approve a limited waiver of the attorney-client and attorney work product privileges with regard to specific information that was previously provided to the board in closed session by staff and counsel. The specific information at issue is the estimate of the highest and lowest likely outcome for revenue to be obtained by IID for water from San Diego County Water Authority under the base price formula. The waiver is for the limited purpose of allowing the internal auditor to make a meaningful public presentation regarding the base price settlement, and only as to the specific information produced by the internal auditor in the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Garber. We will move on to the approval of the order and agenda items.
So, move to approve.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Please vote. Thank you, Gloria. Okay, now we'll move on to public comments. So anybody from the public, please step to the podium, state your name for the record, and you have 5 minutes.
Tony. Good afternoon, members of the board, press, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Oscar Gonzalez, Calexico 844 in Canto Terrace. You know, I just saw the signs that my compadre has, very simple and clear. And he's got a lady, and she attracted me. You know, when they sell a car, Americans are good. They put a nice-looking white blonde, blue eye, and Tony did the same thing. And he's not selling an idea. He's equating that with Imperial Group, Colab, Imperial Valley First. The phony three. I call them the phony three. You know, they may have money, Mrs. Mendoza, Mr. Menville, Mr. Desert, Mr. Hanks, and Mr. Sanchez. They may have money, but in politics, there's only two variables, votes and money. Stella Mendoza, and I'm saying it as a friend and also as a politician, John Pierre, center field for the Red Sox and Bulldogs. He was one heck of a center fielder. And you got the votes, you got people. Socorro Juarez, Chavela Wong, Victor Legaspi, you know, they're the Kennedys of Calexico. They may or may not be out to pasture, but they vote. Hank Legaspi, who worked for the district. And Tony Ramos has a lot of relatives. And although I was called by a racist pig that I was a cucaracha, Mr. Kuhn called me the other day, you know, but I'm not running. I'm not running for election. He is. And he said cucaracha, cockroach. What a gentleman, you know, a pillar of society. And he said it publicly. He's a pig. Look at the way he looks. I'm better looking than him. I'm older than him. I'm 69. Mr. Menville, it doesn't matter how many times KXO articulates that Imperial Group, Colab, and Imperial First, they're not representative of the people. They're not the votes. They can't even buy votes. And Mr. Piggy here, he was wrong when he said I extorted. I don't extort nobody. Maybe his mother extorted him when his father had him. But I don't extort nobody. I have a business, and if you want my services, I've got people that work, put up signs. And but you know what? I don't want to start a pissing contest with a skunk. And Mr. Ramos, the other thing that I wanted to say, Calexico has Barbara Worth out in east of Calexico, there's 2 ports of entry. The old one, 111, and the port of entry where Mr. Menville has property, and your cousin, Tony. I've met Tony through Luis Castro. And he has built a sewer plant and water. With the money that he has invested, he puts it back in, and I thought that was amazing, and we went over there a couple of weeks ago. The reason Luis is amalgamated with that area is because he has a taxi cab, Centinela taxi cab, and a bus company that his son operates. And the road from Carter Road, John Penn Carter's father, pioneer, he was also a farmer. They named that road Carter. You come east off of Menville Road, going south-north, and Carter crosses east and west, and it abuts with Barbara Worth. When you see Barbara Worth, I think that's a responsibility of the county. The road looks like it was bombarded like Iraq and Afghanistan and Vietnam. And that road is a liability. It's really decrepit and needs to be repaired. And I told the Board of Supervisors today, I told John Renison that he will probably be the first Board of Supervisor that takes care of that situation. You're familiar with that road, Mr. Menville?
Yeah, it's Carr Road, though, C-A-R-R.
Yeah, and Barbara Worth. The IID has a substation called Bravo. It's very, very dangerous. God willing, by the bridge. The bridge is older than Calexico probably, or at least 80 years old. We used to swim there, and the Oldagi boys, that's why they were good swimmers. And Peter Biopi used to swim in that All-American. Okay, I've got 10 seconds. So I'd like for the board also to impress the county to repair those roads, because it's welcome to United States, welcome to California, welcome to Calesia. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. Anybody else? Public comments? You have 5 minutes. State your name. Come on, Mr. Kuhn.
Bruce Kuhn, 1240 Drew Road. And I take everything that Oscar said about me as a compliment. Coming from Oscar, that is a compliment. Because, again, not being a deeply religious man, I thank God every day he's working for you and not me. Boy, what a blessing. And you would make Sister Maria Luisa very proud of the way you talk to her in public. She would like that, Oscar. She would be proud of you. Now,
Oscar,
Sister
Oscar,
Maria Luisa
he's talking.
would be
Oscar,
proud
be
of
quiet, please.
Anyway, through throughout the last couple, 2 or 3 weeks, there's been heavy mention on the radio, particularly in the radio and in the Imperial Valley Press, about wealthy, greedy landowners that wanted or needed a third vote on the board to take over the water. And if that happened, this would be reduced to another Owens Valley. That through simple deduction means that there's got to be 2 on this board that are hell-bent on drying this valley up. And I guess I'd like to ask, are you one of them, Mr. Sanchez?
Drying this valley up?
Yeah. Are you hell-bent on drying this valley up and turning it into an Owens Valley?
I'm not betting driving into Owens Valley.
I'm just asking because there are ads in the paper, and I'm trying to find out which 2 it is. I obviously can rule you out, Mr. Menville, since they're your ads, and I have no qualms I have no fight with Ms. Mendoza. I have no dog in that fight. Mr. Desert, are you hell-bent on drying this valley up and turning it into an Owens Valley? How's this? I want to know, and I think the public has a right to know.
No, I'm not interested in doing that at all.
Have you done anything in the past that would give any indication that you were trying to do that?
I don't believe so. It was never my intention to do that.
Mr. Hanks, that leaves you.
It'd be very tough for me to vote to dry up the Imperial Valley whenever my relatives have a bunch of combines out there. I don't know what they'd harvest other than my hide. No, I'm not for a drop of water to leave it.
Well, then, as one who's trying to become another voting member of this board, I can certainly tell you that I have a farm service providing company, and I would be out of business. So I'm not looking forward to that myself. Having spent 8 years on this board, I only fought one wealthy group of landowners, extremely wealthy group of landowners, billionaire landowners. They bought 45,000 acres of farm ground in Imperial Valley, 1/10 of all farmable farm ground in Imperial Valley. They did that. And the president of this board was working with them. Now, that group tried to dry up ground, and it was their intent to dry it up, sell the water to Metropolitan. I fought that. I didn't fight for it. I fought against it. But your sitting president fought for it. Not me. Don Cox and I fought our asses off to stop that. And we proclaimed then and we proclaim now. If he were alive, I still do. It's a public resource. Absolutely. I've never changed my mind. But to be accused of it just doesn't sit right with me. Now, I've heard that there's two up here that, or three at least, that don't want to do that. I don't want to do it. I never attempted to do it, but I did have to fight some wealthy landowners to keep it from happening. I did that, and I'd do it again. That said, I don't know where this adds or where this stuff's going, but it's just not true. Blatantly not true. So, with that, I turn it over to whoever wants to have it, but let's make it clear. I didn't hear anything here today to give me any indication that there's anyone here that's in a conspiracy to dry this up and turn it into an Owens Valley. But there is one, me, who did fight that from happening. But the guy I fought is on the board now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kuhn. Anybody else have any public comments? Please step to the podium, state your name for the record. You have 5 minutes. Mr. Ramos.
Good afternoon. My name is Sonny Ramos, El Centro resident. You know, my signs indicate what it is. I stick by what I say. Mr. Kuhn can question the board. I'm not going to question the board. I'm not going to question any of you because it's a public comment. It's about us, not you guys. And I tell the public, le digo al público, no les hagan caso a estas gentes. I can speak in Spanish because I'm going to, because some of the people hearing me don't speak English. No les hagan caso. Están allí para ayudarse ellos mismos, no a nosotros. Estas gentes tienen una inversión en esta cosa para hacer dinero ellos y no nosotros. And I'll translate it, they got an impact on this because they got something invested in this, not us. I brought my friend Paris Hilton there because she represents money. I tried to call Hollywood Shamer Akramas and they wouldn't give me her number, so the best thing I could do is buy her poster and bring it out. Those $1,500 represent COLAB, Imperial Group, and IID First. There'd be no hesitation about it. And someone told me that Mr. Member belongs to COLAB. Yes, he does, but he's treated like a dog. They don't want to talk to him. He's a member just like anybody else, but he's against what they stand for. I'm a member. And for you, IID First, to say you represent me, it's BS. I've never been to one of your meetings. I don't want to go there. Just like I wouldn't invite you to my meetings. Let's separate and tell the truth about this, you know. You know what this is all about, Jason? It's about this, water. Water right here, and I put the black line. Because that's where we're at right now, público. Así estamos ahorita. Este era un galón lleno de agua que representa el agua que teníamos antes. Ahorita está la línea esta negra, este tape negro que puse. This is what it represents now. To me, this is what it represents. All's fair in politics, and this is what I see, because I brought the same jug or someone like this. What was it when the water passed about 7 or 8 years ago? I brought it, and the main example, it was half full. Now it's only about a fifth full. And if we continue to this, público, esto es lo que va a pasar. Va a llegar a tierra así, mire, tierra seca, como el Dust Bowl, que no tiene nada que ver. Así va a llegar, tierra seca, que se ve en polvo, como el polvo que vamos a ver nosotros cuando nos muéramos. Esa es la verdad. This thing is about what happened in the Dust Bowl during the Depression, where people came to California to survive. You know, and right now, if you think that is the clock right, JP? I didn't think that.
I don't know, Gloria, did you run the clock or no? You got a couple of minutes left. That's
okay.
it.
If you think that the Salton Sea is going to have an impact if we don't mitigate it, just think how the valley is going to have the whole impact on everybody else, Arizona and Mexicali, people in Mexicali. So you're either going to believe us or you're going to believe them. Yo no tengo nada que ganar con esto. A mí no me pagan para hacer esto. I don't have nothing to benefit from this other than the money I spent to build those posters and the dirt I got from my backyard. And that's all I got. Mis manos están limpias. Yo soy un veterano del Air Force. En el Air Force me dijeron a decir la verdad. In the Air Force they told me how to tell the truth. I'm a 4-year veteran of the Air Force during the Vietnam era. Soy un veterano de la Air Force, en la área de Vietnam. No fui a Vietnam, pero con corazón serví a mi país. Y yo les pido que voten por Estela Mendoza y Jean-Pierre Memlo, porque ellos son derechos, ellos son fieles a ustedes, público. Y no les digan que estos pueden hablar lo que quieran. El señor Kuhn, he talks about flip-flopping. Well, he flip-flopped and jumped and did everything else for the water transfer because he was part of it. That's why we're here right now, because of him. It was 3 votes. It was him, the late gentleman, I don't want his name because he's passed away already, and Maldonado. Those 3 votes turned everything the way it is right now. He's responsible for it. And to tell that Jean-Pierre Memlo is a flip-flopper, he's the biggest flip-flopper of them all. Because he played their game. You know, and you know the irony about this? Mr. Kuhn bought me lunch or breakfast a few months ago, and we can still talk. Because if you're going to be involved in politics, you better know how to take it. You better leave this room and be able to shake hands with Mr. Ziz and Mr. Hanks, because you can't, you don't belong here. Public officials are the property of the public. If they don't like it, then you shouldn't run for it. Todo lo que le pido al público, que voten por estas personas, porque nosotros estamos haciendo la verdad. The backs of the Mexican community was help create this community, along with yes, JP, 2 more minutes. Along with the farmers, we need the farmers, and you need us too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. Anybody else for public comments? Mr. Benson, and then Mr. Abadi.
Chairman Menville and the board, Steve Benson, Brawley. I have a blank sheet of paper here because I was waiting to hear what Tony had to say. It's always so fascinating that he comes up with the same thing. Most of us in the community realize that the current board is the one that has enacted the QSA. The fallowing that's part of the QSA today was done by several of the board members that are up here, and it's the only option that the farm community has in relation to conserving water. We, as everyone else, want to conserve water. As chairman of the Water Conservation Advisory Board, I was trying to work forward to that. Now that I'm running for office, I had to step down from that. There is a meeting on Thursday. I hope people can make it to see what the next step in that is. So far, there's been nothing other than some presentations. The farmers would like to see a plan to put it into action so that we can save water and continue farming. There is no thought in the farm community of individual selling of water rights. Back in 2000, when a plan was put together by the farmers, even predating the QSA, predating any lawsuits, this was an original farm plan. One of the first points of that was no individual water sales by farmers. Those farmers out in the community, I'm sure the Farm Bureau would still stand by that plan. So to run on an opposition to farmers, to run that the Imperial Group wants to steal the water is ludicrous. If anyone would go back in time and look at the original proposals before the QSA was enacted, you two up there have it all wrong. The farmers want to continue farming. We want to continue employing people in the community. It is the largest industry in our valley. It is also the oldest industry in our valley, and it will continue to be in our valley. The water will continue to flow in our valley. What I would like to see is the water not be sent out of our valley and create jobs for other areas. We lose jobs every day because we don't have water to support them. There's factories that want to come here. There's people that want to start businesses, but the price of our water to industry is higher than anything else. Some call it a subsidy. I don't believe so. There was a rate study done. If the farmers have to pay more, I believe that they're willing to pay more. They already control 95, or they use 95% of the water in the valley. So you're talking about the 5% difference. It really won't impact the farmers that much. Right now, the cities pay $68 an acre foot. Farmers pay $20. Is that fair to the cities? No. They're at the same gate that I'm at, just one down. I don't understand that. Industry pays over $100. Some pay $300. I know Ormat was up to $400 an acre foot. I think it's highway robbery that this board has continued to attack industry and attack the citizens that live in the communities of the Imperial Valley, undermining their ability to live and pay for their bills, but at the same time attacking farmers, which is the largest industry here in the valley. I think that this board needs to change direction. I think that if we look forward in the future, there'll be continued pressure on the Imperial Valley to conserve water. I represent farmers that are willing to conserve water. I represent the community that wants farming to stay, and I represent that change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. Mr. Abadi.
Thank you, President Menville. Mike Abadi, El Centro, California. Fellow board members, I'm up here today not to anything to the board. Watched last week's, whether it be called a circus or a carnival, was very embarrassing for the institution, but my name was brought up. And I want those people to know that bring up my names. The oath that you took when you were in the Air Force and stuff, all public officials take a similar one. When you're deputized or something like that, you take a similar one about protecting foreign and domestic, and about protecting the Constitution of the United States, not only the state of California, but the United States of America. Well, maybe you didn't. I have several times. My point is, do you think the Constitution, your freedom of speech, allows you to say what you want? Well, the Ten Commandments says you don't.
Thank you, Mr. Abadi. Anybody else have any public comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board, and I'll start with Director Hanks.
I have nothing to say.
Okay, thank you. Director Desert?
No comment today.
Thank you. Director Mendoza?
No comment.
Okay, thank you. Director Sanchez?
Yeah, I think there's interesting topics that maybe could be discussed later in the year. $64 an acre foot per city, half an acre foot, average household, $2.50 a month by the average household. That goes toward the IID. That might be something the district might be looking to look at as far as bringing down the cost from $2.50 maybe down to $2 per household. A lot of the division has been caused because of the QSA, and this board has taken tough decisions to continue to proceed with the contract. The only thing I can say is how I've been brought up, and that is to let my yes be yes and my no be no. While this organization signed a contract, I think it's important that we continue with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Sanchez. The only thing I had to say is I wish all the mothers happy Mother's Day, the upcoming Mother's Day. So happy Mother's Day to the mothers of Imperial Valley. We'll move on to Mr. Kelly, General Manager comments.
No, sir.
Okay, Mr. Garber, legal.
No, sir.
Okay, then we'll move on to consent. There's two items. Is there a...
Move to approve.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, please vote. Thank you, Gloria. We'll move on to information. Page 37, update on the IID Identity Theft Prevention Program.
Members of the board, General Manager, provide the board with the first update of the IID's program on the Identity Theft Detection and Prevention Program. As you recall, we adopted this back in 2010, back in December. It's a requirement of the Fair and Accurate Credit Transaction Act. It's designed to ensure that customer information is safeguarded and to prevent any identity theft. It requires training of our critical staff that deals with employee information. I am pleased to announce that we've up to about 43% of all of our employees have taken the training and signed confidentiality agreements. Just as information, we have both water and energy, finance, HR, general services involved in this. We're also happy to report that we have not had any reportable acts of information that was given out or lost from an employee. We did have one where a customer did call us, but that was to inform us that there was a person that came to her house identifying herself as an IID employee. We took action, of course, and notified the appropriate authorities, and also actually made some announcements in the paper and the radio to be careful. But from our end, we have had no recordable incidents of energy theft or loss. So that concludes the report.
Okay, any questions from the board for Mr. Escalera? Any questions from the public from Mr. Escalera on this issue? Okay, Mario.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to item number 4, general matters with water. Mr. Silva.
Yes, Mr. President, board members. Our water use is in the range of about 115,000 feet more than the estimate. But remember that we haven't really started our fouling program, so we'll have to watch until after we start doing a little bit more fouling, see how it really is. Also, next week we want to come back to you with an amendment to the water supply agreement for the Hudson Ranch plant. They need another 400 acre feet. I don't know if you remember, they might have heard that their well is a lot hotter than they originally thought, and so they need a little bit more cooling water. So we'll be coming back to you. They're in a big hurry, of course, to get started. I think you've seen the invitations to the grand opening and everything. Another item, last Thursday at Imperial Dam Complex had a fire, destroyed one of the homes there. It was, they think it was a the air cleaners that you kind of rotates around. Something shorted out. It was actually pretty new. It was like a week old, and so they think that's what started the fire. And the fire department actually got there in about 7 minutes from the Yuma proving range out there, so they got there pretty quick, but it did destroy pretty much everything in the house. Nobody was hurt or anything, but just destroyed everything in the house. That's all I've got.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Silva on water issues?
On the energy source, what percent of the royalties is that coming back to the water department?
Director Hanks, I don't have that information. I don't know.
If I remember, didn't we have 22 acres included?
Sorry for information. I can check on that.
Okay, all right.
Any further questions from the board for Mr. Silva? I have a question, Jesse, on the fallowing program. I know you guys are still working on trust lands and et cetera, so that's going to be coming back to us next Tuesday?
Next week, yeah.
Are you pretty well getting that worked out of what you're going to do?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I'm meeting one of the landowners tomorrow, and we're trying to get all that worked out.
Okay, because I've had calls from some of the landowners, but I've told them to try to work with staff.
So have I, and so I'm trying to meet a couple tomorrow, yeah.
All right, very good. Any questions from the public on any water issues with Mr. Silva? Okay, seeing none. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you give us an update of some of the ideas that are being thrown around
for the
9,000? Well, conserve the rest.
Yeah, if you remember last time, where there's been some reports in closed session, I believe, but We have about 9,000 acres total that are due, that the leases are due between June 1st and August 31st, I believe. Out of those, about 7,200 acres actually have a good water history of 3 feet and above. Out of those, we looked at how many are coming out of weed and beets, and those are about 3,500 acres. And those are the ones that I'm looking at, because the other ones are in hay or they're in Bermuda longer-term crops, and we don't want to get into those because I don't think it's anybody's benefit to get those. But the ones that are coming out of wheat and beet are the ones that we're looking at. That's about, like I say, about 3,500 acres. So that's what I'm concentrating on.
I'm not sure there's appetite on the board for this, but I mean, with these tenants not able to renew their leases, should we think about treating them as a landowner and paying them like $30 an acre foot?
Well, I think that when we bring it to the board, that's when you have the opportunity to look at all those kinds of options.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jesse. We'll move on to item number 5, general matters with energy. Mr. Ivy.
President Menville, directors, members of the RAS committee, specifically involving the Imperial Valley S-Line RAS, have been meeting over the last couple of months, conducting studies and trying to assess the impact of bringing the Sunrise PowerLink line online. And it looks like that's going to come about on or about the 1st of June. The conditions appear favorable to at least suspend the RAS going through the summertime. And right now, I think that's a good idea simply because it's likely the San Onofre plant is going to be offline going through the summertime, and having that generation online and online reliably so that it's not subject to getting knocked offline by this RAS is a good idea. I will bring in next week a little bit more information on the topic, and we can talk about it some more, give you a chance to ponder, and then we'll try to reach some kind of a decision on that really quick. Right now, it appears favorable to put that in place.
The RAS, if I can interject, the RAS for the public's consideration is the remedial action scheme at the S-Line as it enters Imperial Valley Substation. And it was a subject, one of the subjects covered in the FERC-NERC joint report issued last week, specifically the Mexican generation that was out, and some of the adjoining systems, including ours, weren't aware of it.
On a sad note, we lost a troubleshooter in La Quinta. Mr. Johnny Johnson passed away. He was 67, and he started work with us in 2001. They're having the burial today. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Ivy from the board?
Yeah, I would ask that the general manager put an item on for the next board meeting on RAS agreements that they require board approval. We have a discussion on that.
Okay, any other questions from the board for Mr. Ivy? Okay, any questions from the public for Mr. Ivy on energy issues? Okay, seeing none. Move on to item number 6, Finance, Water Department Debt Defeasance Plan. Mr. Broking, it's on page 52.
Thank you. What I'm about to discuss is a plan to pay off all the water department debt except for the pension bonds. In an overview, I'll discuss briefly what the outstanding debt is. We have it broken down between certificates of participation and revenue bonds, talk about the plan and the benefits, and how that can impact the water transfer financing, have a recommendation, and then talk about where the cash would come from to pay off all the outstanding debt. Okay, we currently have $72 million of long-term debt in certificates of participation and revenue bonds. Three issues comprise that, the largest being the 2004 certificates of participation. That is the Western farmland debt, of which $36 million is still outstanding. Two other issues that we refunded recently, the 2010 bonds and the 2011 bonds, those were refundings from the 2000 and the 2002, and they're $23.3 million and $12.9 million. And based on our current bond documents and covenants, the entire water system net revenue is pledged for payment of this outstanding debt. When I say the entire water system, I'm talking about water delivery and water transfer revenue, and it's actually any revenue that the district or the water department receives is currently pledged to pay off the outstanding debt.
Mr. Brogan, can I ask you a question?
Certainly.
On the $35.8 million you have here on the Western Farms, we sold the ACX property for a little under $15 million. That should have reduced this thing down by at least $14 million.
It can, but we haven't used that money to pay the debt down yet.
All right, but you have the money.
We have the money.
And in reality, it reduces the Western Farms debt down to close to $20 million, correct?
It would lower it to yes, and I'll one of my last slides shows what the money.
Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. So the plan is to pay off all existing debt utilizing cash on hand, and that's water department cash on hand. Approximately, this was as middle of April, $77 million in unrestricted cash will be needed to do that. And in addition to that, there's $8 million of restricted cash that we can use, and that's in debt service reserve funds right now. So when those bonds are paid off or about to be paid off, you can get a release of those funds to use to pay off the debt. And there's two main benefits of doing this. One is there's a gross cash flow savings of about $45 million. So if we, and that's calculated by using the $85 million roughly that we would need less taken from the total debt service payments over the life of the bonds, and that's a $45 million number. And to quantify it on a yearly basis, it's a reduction of about $5.3 million a year in debt service payments. And then the other thing that this would do by paying off all the existing debt, when I talk about all the existing debt, I'm excluding pension bonds. The pension bonds are non-callable debt that both water and energy are paying off their respective shares. But I have discussed this with our bond counsel, I've discussed it with our financial advisor, and I've also discussed it with a couple of investment bankers. And based on that, I think that if all the existing debt was paid off, we would be able to modify the definition and pledge of water system net revenues for future borrowings. And what that means is that if and when we borrow for the water system conservation projects, we would only have to pledge revenues, net revenues from that project. We would not have to pledge any water delivery revenue to repay those bonds. Now, the way we've envisioned it will work is that any money left over paying the transfer debt can be used to support the water delivery operations, but it wouldn't work the other way. It's a one-way street, that any money that would be received through the water delivery system would stay in the water delivery system, and it would not be required to pay for any transfer debt. Now, obviously, this is a plan. We think it's a very doable plan, but until you get to that point where you're asking investors to invest in the bonds, it's like any plan. You don't know whether it'll work, but we're pretty sure that it will. So right now, the current estimate is about $235 million in water system conservation projects. We would, and those, that hasn't been finalized, so that number is subject to change. But we do have $50 million from the Water Authority that we have received. We spent a little of that already, but it would reduce the total amount that would need to be financed to around $185 million. And then just to remind everyone, the state has guaranteed $150 million of net proceeds in 2003 dollars. So that's probably in today's dollars close to $185 million. I haven't done the calculation recently, but it's going to be near closer to 180 than 150.
That's the iBank funds?
Yes, that's the iBank guarantee.
Will you explain what the guarantee covers?
The guarantee covers if the contract is terminated, the state would step in and make payments, but they wouldn't step in immediately. The first 12 months, the debt service payments would be made from the reserve fund. The second 12 months, the district would be liable for the payments. And then beginning on the 25th month, the state would step in and make the debt service payments. So, as I said earlier, we issue bonds to finance the water transfer projects. We only pledge water transfer net revenue to repay those bonds. Water delivery customers would not be legally obligated for debt service payments on the water transfer projects. But we can only achieve this if we defease or pay off all our outstanding water bonds. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there's no reason why the state guarantee still couldn't be utilized under this scenario. And then, as I also mentioned earlier too, remaining net water transfer revenues after paying debt service could be used to support water delivery operations. So the recommendation would be defease all water outstanding debt excluding the pension bonds. And then as we got to the point where we needed to borrow money for the water transfer, fine and pledge that, only pledge the net water transfer revenues for any water transfer debt issue. And then where would the money come from? There's preliminary numbers at the end of March, and about $146 million. I mentioned we need about $77 million or half of that, and you can get that from the working capital, the Western Farms account, and the water transfer reserve account. And you'd still have close to $70 million remaining in the bank, which is still a very liquid number. And any of those accounts can be used to pay water delivery system expenses.
Well, you go first. Greg, are you saying, what are you trying to say is, what we're trying to do is be debt-free other than the water transfer that San Diego will be paying for?
Well, right now I'm saying we'd be debt-free except for the pension bonds.
Right.
And then when we borrowed for the water system delivery project, yes, that would be our only debt in the that I'm planning on in the near-term horizon.
Kevin, is there a plan following being debt-free? Because I think, in everybody's own household, the opportunity to be debt-free, to do a lot more other things, which is why you're debt-free, is you're able to be on the offensive against other organizations who are rattled with debt and they can't fight back. But an organization like us, if we can be debt-free, we can always be on the offensive. But is there a plan to put all this together to where when we look forward into the future, where how much we need to borrow, how we're going to pay it? Do you have your own business plan?
I saw this for the first time last week when Mr. Broking showed it to me and suggested bringing it to your board. I think that the closest thing to a plan would be, this is consistent with the fund accounting move that we're moving toward in water, and the resolution passed by your board in which transfer revenues would be segregated from water delivery. And so I guess the next step after effecting some kind of a move like this would be to do all those things that need to be done to the water system, and to do them as a standalone, just in terms of O&M.
Yeah, that has been my concern from the very beginning. We have an aging water infrastructure system that needs repair on a daily basis. So I'd like to see some of these funds dedicated to maintaining our water system and improving the water system. That, to me, that's very important.
The resolution that we pass with the budget is very consistent with the approach that you're taking here, is it not?
I think it is, because we are trying to, as the general manager said, we're trying to, and we have been segregating those costs, but this will make it a lot clearer, because revenues can only be pledged for one or the other.
Right. And so beginning with the 2013 budget, the expenses that are utilized in the transfer, whether it's employees or consultants or infrastructure or whatever, would be budgeted separately. Is that correct?
Well, they are budgeted separately. We show them separately through the budget process. We did that, I think, for the first time last year, breaking that out for the board, and we will continue to break those costs out for the board.
Well, where I'm headed, Mr. Brokine, is I think it's very important in moving forward that we have the ability to determine what the water distribution system expenses are. And we can adjust the rates accordingly and not just depend on the transfer to backfill. Personally, I think the backfill of transfer money should be for one-time expenditures, capital projects, similar to what Director Mendoza is talking about. And that serves two purposes. One, it helps with the, actually three. It helps with the aging infrastructure. It helps reduce or stabilize the rates, not reduce them, but stabilize the rates. But in addition to that aspect of it, you have a clear, clean accounting system. And in borrowing your money, if you have something in the system that you need to borrow for that's not transfer related, it can be handled. I believe in the resolution we called it deferred maintenance. And it's, to me, it's very important. Otherwise, it's so easy for an organization like this to just start hiring on extra help, and the next thing you know, your revenues are going to salaries instead of the infrastructure. And by doing that, if we limit the participation of the transferred money to infrastructure costs, hopefully then that prevents that natural buildup of employees.
Well, the move toward fund accounting that the board's obviously interested in, this initiative of Mr. Brokings is entirely of his own making. He's brought it forward on his own, and that distinction between pure delivery and water transfer goes beyond even how we account for it.
Well, I think it's important to have that clean slate moving forward. Once you start your fund accounting, you need that clean slate. Whether we can go back because it's been one revenue source, or one account, whether we could possibly go back and separate all that, probably only Mr. Brokey knows that. But if we defease down to where all we have is the pension bond, then we should be able to take care of that. Now, the pension bond is a responsibility of the delivery system, is it not?
Yes, it's an O&M expense, and all net revenues are pledged towards that.
And what is the balance on that? Can you throw the show?
It's I think the total is around $60 million or so, and I think water's responsible for 48.5%, and energy 51.5%.
Okay.
Mr.
Well,
Brogan?
I believe I can support this. I want to state a little more, but I believe I can support this if the crossover money from the transfer is for capital, which helps stabilize the rates.
I concur with Director Hanks, and I'd like to know whether you or Mr. Silva have any idea of the amount of infrastructure repair and maintenance that has to be completed to bring our system to a first-class delivery system. Do you have any ideas?
Actually, Director Mendoza, your board received a report on that. I think it was from Mr. Broking, and the working estimate was $1.6 billion over
50 or 75 years.
Over, several decades.
That includes some work on, most urgent, is some work on the dam?
On the dam.
Yes, the dam is included in that.
Okay.
I'm not clear on this.
Broken, I think, Mr. Sant. Matt, do you have a question?
Yeah.
And Anthony will get you.
Greg, on page 7, that $146 million, $146,452,000. Are those, that's unrestricted cash that we have on hand, or is that expenses that we would be paying off?
That's unrestricted cash that's on hand as of March.
As of March. And we're going to be utilizing off of page 4, approximately $77 million in unrestricted cash will be needed to defease our current bonds.
Yes, that's correct.
And that $77 million, that's actually water transfer money, correct?
No, it's not all water transfer money. It
16 million. Water transfer.
And that water transfer is just from the tail end of last year. So there is some water transfer money that's in the working capital cash number. But the three main components that we'd take it from would be the working capital cash, the Western Farms, and the water transfer reserve.
Now, the Western Farm, that's $19 million. That's money we have on hand to defease our bonds?
Yes, that's money we have in the bank.
That's
yes.
the ACX property sale.
That's the largest share of it, yes.
And after we defease, if we pay off this this $77 million, you're saying we still have $70 million?
Yes, of unrestricted
And
cash.
the majority of that will be water transfer?
No, it'll be the remaining components there, but it's what's left can be used for any legal water expense.
So the water transfer revenues as a whole aren't broken down or aren't here. You're saying that we have $19,193 in water transfer revenues?
No, that's in Western Farms. What we started doing even before, I think, the board resolution. It was either in October or November last year. We started the water transfer reserve calculation, and I think that's probably only 5 or 6 months of activity.
Okay.
It doesn't go back to the beginning of the transfer.
Thank you.
Mr. Sanchez.
Kevin, do we know what we're going to do with the $5.3 million that we will be saving in annual debt service reduction? Will it go back into all these accounts, so to speak?
I think that would be a function of the once this were to happen, of the budgeting process and Mr. Silva's need to staff up at the delivery level in the water department.
My last question is, on the $5.3 million, was this scenario taken into account when you did a presentation last year if the QSA went away and the amount of money that we were going to need?
No, this was not in that presentation.
So this would actually be a good thing then? $5.3 million in savings a year would help. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Brogan, this is a great idea you came up with, so you're worth your weight in gold. Does anybody from the public have any questions? Mr. Benson, you have a question?
If I could just make a couple.
Go ahead and finish up.
Couple other comments. It may, and I'm emphasizing may, but if this were to come to fruition and we were able to just pledge net water transfer revenue for the water system conservation projects, we may be required to have a separate audit of just the water transfer and a separate audit of just the water delivery, because the investors may require that. So I don't view that as a problem. I'm just saying that that might be something we haven't had to do in the past. And then the other thing that I'd like to point out is the $85 million that I'm estimating is the maximum amount I think that we would need to defease these bonds. That's if we used an escrow scenario where we deposited the money till the first call date and paid the debt off. But there are two other options that I would like to attempt before I did that. One is an open market purchase of the bonds, where we contact the current holders of that debt and see whether they're willing to sell it to us. And then the other option, which is a little more complicated, but it could be a cost saving, is to do a formal tender offer, where we announce to the holders of the bonds that we're willing to pay X price to have them returned to us. So that's really what I'm asking for today, is to direction from you to proceed. Obviously, any document that needs to be signed would have to come back to the board for approval. But if we got the direction today, we could start the process and bring it back to you sooner.
Mr. Brokey, would you also give us a number, bring us a number, what you estimate should be in reserves, what should be available for cash flows so that we don't cut ourselves too close?
Yes, I can do that.
Okay, do you feel that you've got board support to move forward then, from what you've heard over the board today?
I think so, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I would say yes, so. Okay, Mr. Benson.
Steve Benson, Brawley. I just had a question. The rate of the bonds, current bonds that you're looking to close, and then anything new that you would have to go out to market for, what would the difference be on the rates? And then you mentioned the long-term capital plan. I just did some quick math, but $1.6 billion over 50 years is approximately $32 million a year. You only make $42 million a year on your 2.1 million acre feet that you're charging farmers $20 for. So I'm wondering how you're going to come up with the money to do the system maintenance. Is that going to come out of the water transfer? Is that the anticipation? Or would you have to go and issue more bonds for those as well?
Regarding your first question about our current rating, I believe we have a split rating. One of the rating agencies has us as a AA minus, and another one has us at A plus. In fact, we might have two at A plus and one at AA minus. By defeasing all your debt, you don't actually go to AAA. You just don't have a rating until you borrow money again. So it's unclear as to what that rating would be. But since we would have no existing debt at the time, I would hope that we would get a little higher rating than we have now. Your other question about where would the money come from to fund the infrastructure needs, and in our financial plan, we have most of that money coming from the water transfer, because you are correct. $1.6 billion over 50 years is more than what a $55 million a year water delivery system can afford. So yes, our forecast has it coming from the water transfer. We will be, if we're successful in this plan, we'll be working with the water department to come up with a new forecast and identify probably other capital projects that we can use with this $5 million a year savings.
Questions? One more question. The last question is the water transfer, as it comes into play. I believe only a third of the water that's conserved is from your system. I might be wrong on that, but the other is on-farm conservation. And the way I understand it now is farmers have to come out of pocket for all costs until it's a verified, approved method of water conservation. There's a number of farmers that have come to me that are tenant farmers, and they're not willing to step forward with any money on ground they don't own. I feel going forward, the district is going to have to look at a way to fund some of that for either tenant farmers or the landowners, because out-of-town landowners, which we know the majority of the landowners in our valley more than likely are not going to fund things for things that they don't get a benefit from. I just think there has to be in a long-term capital plan that, they'll look at the water transfer from the system side and the on-farm side and how you're going to fund that to get your water transfer revenues from San Diego. I think that we can do a lot of this if we look to get a higher price for the water. There's a time now where, they're looking at all their options and we're still one of the lower costs for water out there. Also, this doesn't take into account if the state doesn't come forward and not fund. So if that water transfer actually stopped and we go up to our threshold where we spent our money, it looks like the IID system could collapse if we're relying on water transfer money long term to fund the capital improvements of our own system. So I think it's time to look at other options.
Greg,
Mr. Sanchez.
on the 1.2 billion, is that including interest? Meaning the projects are only about 600 million, and then we pay the other 600 million in interest?
No, that number is in 2009 or $10.
So that's okay. And my next question is on the 100. Is that 1.2 billion include the 185 million from the system improvements?
No, that I can't remember whether it's 1.4 or 1.6 billion.
I think it's 1.6, and I believe that it's. I mean, you're basically looking at 3,000 miles of laterals and facilities and Imperial Dam.
It's your existing infrastructure.
Well, concerning Mr. Benson's comments, it's probably a little premature for us to say how we're going to use that water transfer money other than the 185, because one, you've got to get board approval, and other than the 185 million as far as system conservation or system improvements, that's actually having enough revenues from the water transfer.
I think that regardless of the disposition of even the water transfer or how you generate water going forward or what form the definite plan takes as it moves more in-house, this plan to defease is a good thing,
right,
for IID no matter what. It's a good starting point.
Yeah, Director Hanks has a question.
Yeah, I think the main thing moving forward, when you start talking about 75 years, I'm not going to worry too much, okay? But I think moving forward, the main thing is that we do not get long-term borrowing out past the exits that exist in the QSA, because there are some exits at certain timelines, and we don't want to get ahead of that and then get caught short. But I like the direction that you're taking on this, Mr. Broking, and I also like the way the numbers are coming down and how much long-term indebtedness that we're being asked to consider. It's much more palatable, especially whenever you have a guaranteed loan, even though I know that's qualified, but it does limit your risk. But regardless, moving forward with the QSA and with the state's condition and everything, we're going to have to we're going to have to stay on top of it. We're going to have to look at the business models to make it fit, because the original agreement with the original amounts of money varying now, there's going to have to be some adjustments. And this is a good first move to take a look at and see where we're at. And I think Mr. Benson's right. When we talk about on-farm, we need to go back and see how much of the I-Bank could be used there. But it's a very touchy issue, because you have a voluntary program, and some take make a business decision to participate, and others make a business decision to stay out of it. And so the risk and reward go along with that. And so you can't intertwine the two. And so the direction that Mr. Brokeen is taking, I think it gives us a good starting point to start making that separation so we can keep up with the accounting. And I know the water department is looking at some business case changes to make the revenue fit. So I'm anxious to see what you continue to bring forward, Mr. Brokeen.
Is there any other questions from the public on this issue with Mr. Brogan? Okay, seeing none.
I'd just like to commend Mr. Brogan for coming forward with this plan. It's a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brogan.
Being debt-free always is. Thank you.
We'll move on to, it's going to be the first action item, number 7, dealing with energy system operators center staffing and employee retention requirements. Mr. Keller, are you going to handle this? Because I see Mr. McCann's not here.
Yes, Mr. McCann is absent this week. And so you have in your packets the backup that was provided last week with some revisions that I think are fairly insignificant. What I'd like to do is I have some prepared remarks, and then with the board's indulgence, I'll just answer your queries about this item. While I don't want to tie this recommended action directly to the September 8th outage and the FERC-NERC joint report issued last week, I think that a reasonable question to ask of IID in the aftermath of that event is this: what is the district, as an energy balancing authority, doing about it? Since the September 8th outage, IID has taken a number of affirmative steps in support of its balancing authority, which is what allows the district, among other things, to retain its autonomy and set its own rates. The System Operations Center is obviously a focus of the FERC-NERC report and will clearly be a subject of continuing scrutiny as these federal regulatory bodies launch their more formal inquiry into the event. The action I am recommending represents what I believe must be an organizational imperative on a going forward basis. That is, no matter what the outcome of this particular inquiry, there is no more important function of the district as a balancing authority than to address the staffing level and resources allocated to the SOC. This is not an inexpensive proposition, but like the Dixieland transformer, we're in the process of moving to our Coachella Valley substation. It is incumbent on management and indeed the board to act with dispatch now that it has been revealed. I am mindful that the recommended action includes a salary adjustment to eliminate the disparity that exists between the SOC and the recently initiated real-time trading desk. Just to be clear, these are not management positions we are talking about. They are instead highly trained and fairly specialized employees who comprise the heart of our balancing authority. For this reason, I am proposing that the financial impact of roughly $1.1 million that comes with this action be paid for out of the Balancing Authority Reserve Fund. The board will recall that the purpose of this fund, as reflected in the 2012 budget resolution, was to buttress the district's balancing authority, and that, in my view, is precisely what this action would do. A PowerPoint is included in the agenda, but I would prefer to respond to any specific questions or concerns from the board at this time.
Director Mendoza.
Mr. Kelly, as I told you before, this proposal does not, in my mind, address the lack of management's ability to address the real issue here. And until that is addressed and rectified, I cannot support this proposal. Because I believe that even with this proposal, and I have to be very careful how I say this, the situation will remain, and it will just continue to get worse. So I cannot support it until we do the deep cleansing that we need to do, and really fix the problem from the bottom up. And so I can't support this mandate.
Director Sanchez.
Yeah, last week we spoke in detail as informational about the 6 positions being added in the SOC for a couple of reasons. One is the NERC-FERC recommendations to solidify it, as well as employees transferring within department. I don't like the way it was brought to the board as if moving up in the company or was a bad thing, so to speak, or wanting a different career path and having an organization like IID allowing that to happen, but of course always choosing the best and brightest employee. But we didn't really talk about the 30 employees on top of that, or 24 plus a 6, 24 employees on top of that in the division, as far as a pay grade upgrade, and a lot of those, I believe, talking to HR, is that are in rank and file and the PSA, which we currently have negotiations with for the next 3 years. If anything, I'd like to see us amend this recommendation to just the 6 positions and put those 24 in with their respective bargaining units for a 3-year contract.
Is that a motion?
I'll make it as a motion.
Is there a second?
I would, I'll second it, but I'd like to modify your motion somewhat. Okay. I think, the concerns that Mr. Kelly has to protect the balancing control area is of utmost importance. As I mentioned last week, to the Energy Department, it's sort of like our water rights to the Water Department. Just, so what I'm hearing from the board, the intent is to provide sufficient funding for training, staffing, and tools to protect the BCA. But at the same time, we want you to continue scrutinizing the FERC-NERC report and deal with those issues. So we don't want to tie your hands and the budget to jeopardize the balancing control area, because that is first and foremost. The motion that Director Sanchez, it was 6 positions, fund 6 positions, subject to the salary negotiation. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I would
with
also
the flexibility of tools.
Yeah.
Right, and training.
I would also ask that the funding for this come out of the balancing control fund that we have established in the budget.
Right.
And that, if you're in agreement with that.
That's fine.
Okay, is there any further discussion, Director Desert?
That funding we're talking about is going to be throughout the year until we do a new budget, or is that going to be ongoing?
That would be through the year until we do a new budget.
Okay, I'm in agreement with this. Is there any comments from the public? Mr. Campbell?
Hi, Mike Campbell, Imperial County resident, 5 years, City of Imperial. Seems to be some differences in information that was presented last week and this week and what the board is looking at as a member of the public. The only thing that we've seen is the board agenda memo, which indicates that apparently there's an issue with turnover. There isn't anything specifically about an issue with NERC requirements. And so, unfortunately, the only thing I prepared are questions relating to turnover and how the board is going to deal with that information. The board packet does say that recently there's been a turnover in number of transmission, operation, and balancing authority positions that are a result of a loss of expertise in these areas. Additionally, it says the current rate of pay at the SOC positions is well below that of similar positions in most neighboring utilities, as well as similar positions within the district. The inequity in pay is driving the departure of personnel from the SOC. My question is, what's the data that identifies how many departures have been created in the SOC? I'm unaware that there's been a mass exodus of individuals from that department. My other concern is the positions that are actually identified as additional also include salary increases for vacancies. So if we have vacancies, how do we know that those vacancies need to have increases when we don't have anybody leaving those positions, let alone filling those positions? Additionally, if you fill those positions, isn't it likely that people who would move to a 31 grade or a 27 grade would also come from the SOC at the lower grade, creating backfill situations, which inevitably means we're still going to be backfilling and managing that issue of resources? A question additionally would be, the board is obviously addressing a situation that this is a very important function, but there are other issues to be concerned. And I don't know if these positions or salary changes have been vetted as a meet and confer issue with those that are representing those staff members or other members of the organization. Changing grades is not something taken lightly by any of the other members of the district. Additionally, the cost for this, it's an estimated $1 million. We did not see any information that this is in fact fully loaded, including benefits and OPEB. So I'd ask the board that you probably need to look at what is the total amount of information or for the salary amount that's being asked for here. In the presentation packet information, we did see that there apparently is a salary disparity between system operators. However, in the packet, it's asking for 6 new positions and other positions, none of which have been identified as system operators. So my concern is the information that's being presented and the decision that the board is being asked is not necessarily, I don't want to say inaccurate information, but incomplete information. That if you're going to compare apples to apples, then the positions need to be apples to apples. And if you're asked to incorporate 6 new positions, then you need to understand or identify what's the cost difference between those and other areas. That information has not been presented to the board. And finally, as a matter of procedure, the recommendation probably should be a budget amendment, as this is an issue of budget. You're changing the budget to add 6 new positions, and you're adding an increase to current and future budgets of $1 million. And as a ratepayer, I would be interested in finding out how the budget is going to be affected this year and in the future years. Thank you.
Mr. DeVoy, do you have any answers to any of those questions from Mr. Campbell?
I'd like to make a comment before Mr. DeVoy.
All right, go ahead.
The motion was for 6 positions at the existing salary. There are some salary issues that we expect HR to bring back to us from negotiations. But I just want to make it clear, this is for 6 positions. This is not for additional positions. This is not for upgrades. The request was for that, but that is not the motion.
My understanding
Correct.
from the board is that you wish to go forward with the additional head count and that you and the training that goes along with it, but that you are not wanting to go forward at this time with the salary adjustments of $212,849.
And Mr. DeVoy, what would be the cost for the 6 positions and the training?
I'd have to determine that. They're 2 computer systems and application specialists at the current rate that's currently approved, 2 operating engineers at the current rates, and 2 new trainees, which are trainee transmission reliability operator and generation and balancing interchange operator. And those would be trainee at a lower level than our current approved levels. So it would be, I would have to determine that or calculate that.
We'll bring that. We'll bring that back to you. The System Operations Center, regardless of what these 6 people are doing, they're engaged in the business of operating our system. So for our purposes, for your purposes, they're
and it's
operators.
certainly captured within what has been presented to you.
And I understand that, and Kevin, I wish I could support this, but until we solve the whole issue of that department, I guess I'm just taking a stand against the status quo.
I can appreciate that.
It's not that we don't need them, but I have to take a stand.
I can appreciate that. My only interest in bringing it forward mid-year in this way is because I don't think that we can take the chance of entering the summer with the status quo.
Okay, any other questions? Oscar, is this related to this issue? Yes, sir. Okay, well then, say it real quick. Go ahead, because we're ready to vote. You got to go to the podium to speak.
No, I have a lot of experience in personnel. I work for the county as the affirmative action officer from 75 to 85. I think what you need to analyze, what you're lacking, there has to be a salary analysis within job classification. For example, it's very difficult, like Mr. Campbell said, comparing apples with oranges. And the problem with that assumption is that you cannot do that unless you go to another public utilities comparable to the IID. When you do that, that's what you call salary analysis, comparing job classifications, no, not job categories, engineers with engineers. And you need to do, you haven't had that. The only thing that Campbell presented was a hypothesis. 2 concepts make a hypothesis, a theory. Once you prove the hypothesis, you go to a theory. What I'm proposing you need to do, you need to hire people that are competent to do those salary. I'm one of them. I'm not interested in a job, but you need to hire a consultant to do salary analysis, compare engineers, not only here, but in other public utilities. Do you understand what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
In conclusion, I can tell you, I don't have to go to Bangladesh to know that people are starving to death. The administration is one of the culprits. Brady, number 1. And maybe Mr. Kelly, he hasn't been here, but he's been messing around with Marlene Thomas's proposal. He finally said he's going to put it out
let's
to...
not, Oscar, don't get off the subject. Either say what you're talking about here or sit down, please.
Okay, well, I'm not going to sit down.
All right.
Anyway.
Well, then just speed it up because we're ready to vote, okay?
Okay, thank you. Please hire some competent person who knows how to do salary analysis. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah,
Mr.
just
Sanchez.
for informational purposes, on the you guys have it, we call it
the analysis.
The analysis on wages surveys. What the IIDs is will be paying their employees on page 64. And you'll find it will be right in the middle.
Let's wait. We have a motion on the floor, and hopefully everybody understands it, so please vote. All right, thank you. We were going to move on to the item number 8, which is the appointment of an alternate to the enterprise zones.
Make a motion to approve.
Antonio Ortega.
Antonio Ortega.
Second.
To appoint
Is there
as
any
alternate.
discussion? Okay, please vote. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item number 9, approval of the temporary land conversion fallowing program. Tina?
Hi, good afternoon. I bring to you today the documents necessary to take action on the temporary land conversion fallowing policy. If you'll recall the history of this, through the integrated resource planning process, we had originally hoped to develop a coordinated land use water supply policy. In the discussions we had with the county, due to their permitting process and the use of conditional use permits, that short-term nature, prohibited us from developing those types of policies to supply other projects that perhaps the timing wouldn't match, and it would be difficult to ensure that the water supply was available for those new projects via the interim water supply policy that we had previously developed. So the board came back and tasked us, now that we started to see particularly the solar projects developing, what can we do to ensure that we maximize the productivity of that ground, not only for the change in temporary land use as it converts to a solar policy, but also to the water use that would have been used had it been kept in agricultural production. So we did a lot of research to see what mechanisms were available, and what we have glammed onto was a piece of legislation, Water Code 1013, that was modified during the QSA to enhance the definition of fallowing and expand it so that it's not necessarily so short-term in nature, and also allows a change in use over a longer period of time. So what you have here is a policy intended to take advantage of that expanded wording of the definition of fallowing and the classification of that water as conserved water. It is limited. This water could only be used for purposes of conservation, for transfer purposes, and also for environmental mitigation. That being said, it does provide us with an additional water management tool, because that would perhaps prevent other more expensive projects from having to be implemented and free up those monies for use on other projects, or to steer more towards on-farm or those type of projects. So what this policy does is provide that tool, that flexibility that we don't currently have, and allow us to maximize the use of that water in those years which we wouldn't have increased supply to take it, increased demand to take advantage of it as well. So we're bringing this forward. We've got the resolution of approval, which also references the environmental compliance report. We've had some initial consultations with the county and the Air Pollution Control District, keeping in mind that these projects are already being permitted and occurring. This actually tiers hand in hand with the findings the county is making through their CUP process, that the mitigation is appropriate through the CEQA process, and that economically speaking, it's providing a benefit to the county.
Okay, any questions from the board for Tina?
No, I'd just like to commend Mrs. Shields on a well-written document. I know that we vetted it and we discussed it over and over again, and it's very concise. Well, nothing you do is concise. Let me take that back. But I think it covers just about every item that we were concerned about, and I want to thank you for it.
Thank you. And for implementation purposes, once the policy is adopted, if that's your desire, we will be modifying the terms of the water supply agreement. We have, at this point in time, not committed any water to solar projects. We've asked them to please hold off while you consider this policy, and then we would develop a landowner contract. We'll try to keep it as concise as can be, that basically acknowledges participation in this program. And the big caveat for those participants is that the land goes back into agricultural production at the conclusion of the project, which is how the CUP language is as well.
Mr. President, I'd like to move to recommend adoption of the temporary land fallowing policy as recommended in this resolution.
Okay, there a second? I'll second it. Okay, is any further discussion by the board?
Yeah, I have several items. First, I'm glad to see us attempt to address the solar water issue. It's kind of got the cart before the horse, but we're addressing it anyway. I think that this policy serves well as far as transfer needs and using the water. There's going to be some challenges, I'm sure, from other agencies on this policy. The part that I'm concerned with is the entitlement water that's held in trust. There's numerous issues in here that addresses the leasee, the developer, and the landlord. And those may be appropriate for transferring water and reaching some type of agreement. But in terms of protecting our water rights that are held in trust, the entitlement, that is an issue with the landowner, and it's an issue of forbearance. This policy, again, I'll state, I believe it goes a long ways in meeting the issue of utilization of the water that's going to be left over. But it was never planned. It wasn't part of the QSA. This addresses as part of the QSA. But to drive my point home, what is the cost of conserving this water?
This policy anticipates no payment to the landowners. They're making those decisions outside of this as it moves forward anyhow. So there is no payment anticipated with this.
But what I'm saying, it was never considered as a method of conserving.
Well, it was. I mean, this was the state.
No, there was
added language.
I'm addressing Tina, Mr. Garber. There was a whole list of costs for conserving water. This is probably the lowest hanging fruit, which is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not opposed to this. I'm just saying you can't forget the other part, the entitlement. Okay, we're asking for forbearance of water for the duration of this fallowing. There is wording in here that requires it to return to farming. There is a requirement to have that water available when we return it. And that's the issue that I'm concerned is not being addressed. And all that I'm asking is that we have an attorney. His responsibility is protecting our water rights. We have attorneys that deal with the transfer and commingle with the water rights. I would like to see this policy reviewed by our water rights attorney to make sure that we're not leaving water on the table as water that could be captured. I don't even want to use the word. I don't want to tip anybody off. I want to make sure that we have it protected. And I think, what I'm asking the board is to give our attorneys time to look at this, to make sure that we have protected our entitlement water, that we're not putting it out on the table, jeopardizing it to some other agency.
Okay, any other, are you done with your comments?
Are you saying we should wait on approving it, or we should approve it and do that?
Well, I really believe, the county's a permitting agency, and I don't think there should be any permits given on ag land without an agreement from the landowner that there's forbearance for that water for us to use locally. I don't want it left out there. I don't want someone coming in here, buying up ground, and then just idling it and not using the water, and then it's underused water. I think we have to be protected from that, and I don't see that in here. This is good for transfer purposes, but in protecting the entitlement, I would like to see that second opinion to make sure it's in here. If it's not, make an addition to it, commingle it. It may be that we go to the county and say, in issuing permits, negotiate with them that we would like part of the process, that there be an agreement that the water is a forbearance, that we hang on to it, we have rights to move that water within our area.
I think there is a need, there's a continuing need to go to the county. As you know, this should have occurred before the permits were issued. And especially with those projects out at Mount Signal, we need to have a policy in place in which we can capture that water and the resulting savings from the land conversion. The county, especially the idea of forbearance, ought to be built into the county process. It is the land use agency. It would take some of the onus off of IID.
I think we need it for the protection of our entitlement that's held in trust.
What's interesting about what the county does is they have a CUP that says at the end of the project you have to turn it back into ag, but they sort of ignore the issue about the water. And I think what you're saying is you want some further protection. I don't know what that would be.
I don't either.
And I don't know that there is anything, Director Hanks.
Yeah, but I would like to have that checked out before we move too quick.
And we did, in an earlier version of this, pursuant to your request, have Mr. Carter look at it. We can do that again.
Yeah.
This policy has not changed.
His opinion states that this is possible, but it doesn't deal with the other aspect. He wasn't tasked with looking at the entitlement protection. He was tasked would make an opinion whether we could use this for the purposes as stated here.
If the purpose is for that someone coming in and buying up ground and then using it as water transfer, but the landowner isn't getting paid for the water to use it as transfer, such as these landowners, I don't see why anybody would come in and buy ground to not use the water for farming, since if the precedence here is that the people who have solar on it, that particular ground, those particular landowners aren't getting paid for the water being transferred. They're just getting $900 an acre for rent. I don't understand that.
I have a question. Mr. Shields, you have been in consultation with Mr. Carter regarding this policy.
Correct. My understanding of his impression of this document is it's consistent with the legislation and the
Correct.
future right to service.
And we have spoken and reviewed this policy, not just today, but but we have in the past.
No, he looked at the opinion. He presented an opinion. Okay, he had nothing to do. My understanding, he had nothing to do with the construction of this.
He did not work on this. He only opined on the.
Yeah, and I would like for him to look at the finished product, okay, and then give his blessing on it, or say, you know,
Well,
need to take
you
a
know
step
what? Everybody knows that this thing has been coming back for a vote at this point in time. I think, Director Hanks, you were the one that requested to bring something like this forward because of the solar projects that were going in.
Yes,
And, we've all been working on this, and Mrs. Shields has worked on it, and I know that the QSA attorneys have worked on it, and I know that Mr. Carter has worked on this, and you know, I'm ready to vote on this thing. And if we sit around here waiting for the county,
We're
and
not
what
waiting.
they're going to do, we're not going to get anything done. And nothing against the county, but as Mr. Kelly said, they went ahead and permitted all these land use projects and didn't even take into consideration what was going to happen to the water. A lot of them were pushed through, and then we all start deciding what to do after. And we're the water agency in this county, and it's up to us to protect this water and make sure that it doesn't end up going downstream somewhere where we don't get a benefit out of it. And we need to take action on this.
If you, let me ask you this, Tina. If one of these projects that's been approved, okay, and there's just a small number, and the will serve will hopefully correct part of that, okay, but we're having to go back and correct some things. What happens if one of these companies decides, you know, they bought the land and they decide to put the solar in, but they don't agree to a forbearance? And what if they just let the ground sit idle and there's no forbearance? You know, and this is a big concern. This is what we went through years ago on someone coming in, buying the ground and idling it. All we're saying, if you're going to put it to solar, there's a forbearance agreement so we can be assured of the water. What that looks like legally, I don't know. But the agreement is to return it to farm ground at the end of the project term. And it's going to be important, you know, because they're going to have a right to call on water. That's part of the opinion that was given to us. So we have to make sure that that water is held onto. You cannot put it out there on the table and speculate and take the risk of us losing this water through some challenge that's coming up because we didn't close the door and hang the lock on it. We might believe we closed the door, but we haven't hung the lock on it, and I want to make sure of that.
This thing says an adoption of a temporary land conversion fallowing policy. It's temporary land.
What this is to do is to be
We're going to adjust it as we go.
correct. It's to go hand in hand in parallel with the CUPs that are being issued to permit these projects. To my knowledge, this is the best opportunity to take advantage of these projects. We intend to implement them through text and wording that legal counsel is working on as a part of the water supply agreement that will require their participation in these in order to receive that service for that project. These projects are moving forward. Absent the water supply, we're allowing them construction water, but they're in need of water supply agreements. So that is our goal, would be to mirror these hand in hand.
The leasee and the tenant, I don't believe, has the authority to sign a forbearance.
We'll be getting landowner
agreements. That is a landowner.
It's the landowner.
I think what you're calling a
landowner
forbearance is the document, the contract that the landowner is going to sign. And it's an interesting agreement because you're going to have a water supply agreement by the developer who arguably is in control of the ground. And then you're going to have a document from the landowner that recognizes, they're both going to have to recognize what's going on, which is this project's been approved under a CUP as an exception to the land use. This ground has historical ag use and water history, that both entities agree that when this project is over, they have to restore it to ag, which, by the way, the developers agreed anyhow to get the CUP. Both entities agree that there's not going to be agricultural water service during the pendency of this project, and that the industrial developer is going to get industrial water service. That's in essence. Plus, both landowner, and this is what's kind of tough, is the landowner is going to have to provide certain things, and they're not getting anything from IID other than what they're receiving, the benefit from the developer. So where you might get some problems, the landowner might say, no, I'm not going to sign that.
Without that forbearance, if we end up in a court case and we take that shot at that chance and we lose that court case, where does that water go if there is no forbearance agreed to? It's gone, Mr. Garber. It is gone.
No, I'm not
forever.
disagreeing with you, sir. And we've got an agreement that the landowner needs to sign, and we can bring that back and show it to you. But I do understand that that's going to be a big issue. I'm not disagreeing with you, Director Hanks.
I make a motion that we table this until the attorney has a chance to.
Isn't there already a motion on the table? There's a motion.
I got a motion on the floor. Did it die for a lack of second?
I didn't hear a second.
I'll second it.
I thought you made a motion.
I have a
Where's
motion pending already.
It doesn't matter. I call for a
Kill
vote.
his motion then. He made a motion, you got a second. So let's vote on it. He has a motion to table this, so please vote. All right, let's go on.
Let's go with my motion then.
Your motion is that we move forward.
I call for the question.
Okay, call for the question.
I got some discussion still. I haven't had a chance. Tina, this water that's going to be produced, will it be available to the farmers through a water bank in an overuse year?
For purposes of this program, we're limited on using the water for transfer purposes or for mitigation. That being said, it may supplant other projects, and the water created by those projects could be used. Currently, if we have a demand situation where we have a farmer that farms a crop that uses less water, that water is naturally made available on a year-by-year basis. So absent this policy, that can occur. Where you can't take advantage of that is years where the demands aren't as high as the supply. And what the intent is to use this policy to provide that flexibility so that we can maximize our management resources. But currently, it can already happen that way. So it's a way of moving water around and accounting for it that provides you that flexibility tool that we don't currently have right now.
Okay, I understood. And on this use of this water, storage has always been a key conversation, a key topic for this board. The board is all for storage. I don't see any language in here that allows, and this is a great step. No one's been more for this solar water project work than Director Hanks or myself. But storage is I don't see that the availability or the opportunity to even talk about putting this solar water into storage.
And that's been one of the constraints that limits us right now in our flexibility is we don't have that storage. To the extent that IID develops storage where it could put water in, you may not have as much of a need for this type of a policy, but absent that, this provides that flexibility, at least on a limited term nature.
But I'm in agreement with Director Hanks. I mean, our water attorney, local water attorney, Mr. Carter, has been with the IID for years. Valued for years, protecting our water rights, and this board is all in agreement on that. We've discussed that. He's given his opinion on this, but I think it would be prudent for us to take the opportunity to run this by him. Well, we run everything else by him. Take a look at this language. Make sure that this water we're not creating a new classification of water that may have some kind of vulnerability to it outside of this QSA transfer or water conservation. We don't want to reduce our water rights at all. And water rights are a big issue in protecting those water rights. So we don't want to be producing and developing a new category of water that has a lesser water right than our existing priority. Also, the storage is key to it, and I think it'd be a great consideration if we could take that opportunity for a little more time to address those things.
Tina, the agreement that Jeff was talking about, have you found the landowners who are entered into these agreements? Are they willing to sign this agreement?
Not had conversations with landowners. I've had some landowners calling, requesting a letter of commitment to future water service, and I know the board has expressed concern with doing that. We feel that this is a mechanism to provide them with the assurance that by participating in this program, in the future they'll have a right to service under whatever rules are in establishment at that time period. That's consistent with Mr. Carter's explanation in his review of this. We could certainly have Mr. Carter review this again. It's my opinion that he's reviewed the policy and provided a memo to you all saying this is consistent. You know, perhaps you've read that differently than me, but that's my understanding of his review of this.
He did. I talked to him. He reviewed this.
Call for the question.
Yes, call for the question. Please vote.
Wait a minute.
We're calling for the question. Call for the question. We're going to vote.
You can cut off discussion when we haven't had questions answered? I don't think so.
I called for the question was called for, so please vote.
We have comments.
Vote.
You're going to give the public a chance to, they're standing up waiting.
Let's go hurry.
Here.
Thanks, Oscar. Go ahead. Oscar, go ahead.
Please don't rush me, Mr. Menville.
No, go ahead. I'm not going to rush you.
You know, based on the assumption that we won't get sued, you know, and it won't cost the IID any money, I hope that it passes. But on the other hand, if we do get sued, it'll be 3 people, you know. There's no rush. I think Mr. Garber subtly indicated that he didn't disagree with Mr. Hanks or Desert. And I don't know what the rush. I mean, we get sued all the time. We have a gentleman here, Mr. Morgan, that's ready to sue us. You just gave him bullets, and he may sue. He's got the money and the time. You know, why get into that? Why spend money? Why? The bottom line, and I'm done, it's taxpayers' money. We all voted for you. We all want you to do what's right. Even Mr. Garber said, and I'm going to reiterate, he didn't disagree with Hanks and Desert. I hope we don't get sued, you know. And if it does prevail 3-2, when we get sued, please remember what Oscar Gonzalez said. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kuhn.
It seems simple at first. You know, water conserved in this valley stays in this valley, or is at least used here as long as it's used reasonably and beneficially. If it's saved off this project or these solar installations or projects, it stays here for our use. You don't have, well, how's this? The Bass Brothers came, they bought a bunch of ground, they were going to dry up land, take water, sell it. What they found was you can't do that. You can't do that under the structure of the IID in the IID service area. It can't be done. The reason it can't be done is you have state Supreme Court law on your side. There is case law that says no one can come in here, buy up this ground, dry it up, and sell it. Now, can law be changed? I've been told, yes, it can. Supreme Court decisions are rarely changed, and it takes a hell of a lot of effort and a lot of money and big effort to do that. So the water that is saved off these projects is covered under California State Supreme Court statutes to be used reasonably and beneficially here. So no one can come in here and buy ground and dry it up as you were concerned about, Director Sanchez. I mean, they can, but they can't sell it. It is illegal for someone else or for a private party to sell water. And that's why when I hear about all these water grabs that's going to happen, the only entity in this valley who can sell this water outside the district boundaries is the IID. Not an individual farmer. No greedy rich farmer can do that. Nobody can come in here and become a greedy rich farmer and do that. So you are protected. She got a program. If it makes extra water, then that'll be extra water we can use here. And you don't have to worry, at least not now under the state statute, you don't have to worry about someone coming in here and making a grab for it.
Thank you, Mr. Crew. Mr. Benson, do you have anything to say?
Steve Benson, Brawley. I just had a technicality. It was... Sorry, I just had a technicality. It on the first paragraph, it talks about this policy addresses projects that will remove land from agricultural production on a long-term temporary basis and is intended to increase the local benefits of new non-ag projects. And the question is, and it's come to my attention, to increase the local benefits, is that saying that it's an increased beneficial use of the water or just a different use with new benefits to the community?
What that is trying to acknowledge is these projects are being permitted absent the IID's policy, and to the extent that we can create a mechanism to maximize the benefits of a project that's being permitted from a land use perspective to the district's benefit, we're attempting to do so.
Yeah. What you have to keep in mind here is that without this policy, IID still gets this water for its use. We're not creating water that we don't have. If this water is saved, we get it. What the policy does is it says we can use it for transfer or for environmental. If we use it for transfer, there's a financial benefit to IID because the cost to create this water is less than the cost that would be used to create it in some other way. And that trickles down. And if this water is used for transfer, then maybe other water may be available for other purposes. But this is not water we wouldn't get otherwise. We will get it because it will be not used because of these projects.
You know,
Are you saying the water's unneeded?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying...
That's the danger.
No.
That's the danger.
Mr. Benson, do you have
I just wanted to continue to say I do support the project. I think that this is a good use of water that isn't being used. The one question that came to mind in reading this, it doesn't say anything about farms being able to use it. I know there was the intent to transfer it, but then what if geothermal was to come in and buy a farm and put in jojoba trees or something crazy, I don't know, that uses very little water? Could they then use the extra water they've conserved to run their geothermal plant, or you look at those uses differently?
President Minville, there are a couple of companion documents that are going to have to be developed. One you've talked about. It's the landowner release. The other is what to do about Could you ask your question again, Mr. Benson?
Well, maybe I can answer it.
Let Tina answer the question.
There was a concern raised last week about whether or not this water would be available for in-valley use, concerned that it was another transfer or some grand scheme beyond what the policy was intended. In section 4.2. Actually, it's in the background. It's the last paragraph before section 3.0. We did add an additional statement after a semicolon that says, this reduced demand allows additional water to be made available for other users under IID's annual consumptive use cap. What that's trying to say that the way IID delivers water on an annual basis, to the extent somebody uses less, that's more available for somebody else. But there's years in which demands don't exceed supply, which we don't have an opportunity to put an IID benefit to that water. And this is attempting to maximize those years.
No, I view this document as a water management tool. And Mrs. Shields has been very diligent in formulating this policy with the assistance of her attorneys. So I'm very comfortable with it, and I'm ready to vote.
Okay, Mr. Benson, are you finished? All right, please vote. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 10, which is commercial paper. There's only 2 items left. So, commercial paper program, Series C note, page 83. Go ahead, Mr. Brogan.
Okay. The current commercial paper program was approved by the board in 2007. It was in the amount of $200 million. It was a Series A and a Series B. One was taxable and one was non-taxable. You could issue as much as $250 million of taxable CP, or the limit on non-taxable was 200. But the total at any one time could not exceed 200 million. There are further restrictions on that 200 million. Only 175 million can be for the energy department and 75 for the water. Here again, the total being 200 million. One thing to keep in mind on commercial paper program, you cannot issue commercial paper unless you have a letter of credit backstopping the issue. And then we currently have one letter of credit. It's issued by Union Bank. It's for $100 million, and it limits the energy department to 75 and the water department for 50. So that's currently where we are. What we're proposing to do is issue or approve, not issue, but approve a Series C level of commercial paper in the amount of $200 million. That is even more flexible, where we could issue $200 million under water department or $200 million under the energy department. However, if the board was to approve this, no commercial paper could be issued under that program until we obtained a letter of credit. And we've had discussions about trying to obtain an additional letter of credit, and to date we really haven't been very successful. So at this point, I'm not sure how soon we would even want to obtain a letter of credit. But one thing that issuing this new series, or approving this new series, does, it basically starts the validation process for us with the state. So once the state validates the commercial paper program, and it's been in effect, I think, 6 months, then it's very difficult to be sued by issuing paper under this program. And so what I'm asking today really is it's a plan that would preserve our options. We're not planning on issuing a new letter of credit anytime soon. If we are, we have to come back to the board for approval. It just it gives us greater options than what we have now under our current letter of credit.
Okay, any comments from the board for Mr. Brokin?
Mr. Brokin, how are you going to pay the commercial paper back?
We pay it back through rates.
Is that through we pass a bond? This will roll into a bond?
It could. More than likely, it would. But we've done it both ways in the past. Sometimes we have borrowed through the commercial paper program and just paid it back with our reserves. We've also issued it like we did under the El Centro Unit 3 project, where we issued the short-term debt and took it out in long-term debt.
On the bond, on the CP, what's the maximum length of time that it can run?
I believe it's limited to, generally we get a letter of credit for 3 years, but individual commercial paper doesn't go past 270 days, so it can be renewed for another period of time, but we can't go past, it's not 3 years. I think we have to cut off 2 or 4 weeks before that time period.
Are you planning on using some of this money for capital projects that were approved in the budget?
I'm not planning on using the Series C. No, I'm not. But for Series A, I am. Series A is our current program that has a letter of credit.
Was it listed as? Well, it was in the budget. That means then with the rates, we'll have it paid off before the 270 days is up?
more than likely, no. We'll probably roll it over, which means an investor will take the paper again for another period of time.
It appears to me that it's deficit spending.
Well, I guess you could say most borrowing is, you could say it's a form of deficit spending because you don't have enough money on hand to pay for those projects, so you're spreading the cost out over a period of years that benefit the project. And so from that point of view, I guess you could call it deficit spending.
When we put the rate stabilization money into a restricted account, did that create financial issues that we're dealing with commercial paper?
It does, yes. It limits the amount of money that could be available for capital projects.
John.
Yeah, Anthony, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
You through, Director Hanks?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm trying to put all the pieces together. Earlier today, we have the debt-free scenario as far as, I'm guessing, the 30-year, those bonds that were defeasing $77 million. And because we are a nonprofit organization, we have to put money up front for to invest in things that the district may need, and then pay that back. I'm seeing a path forward. I'm not sure if that's what's being presented, but it seems like instead of having to, which at the same time doesn't make sense because you also have the working capital cash. So the $200 million, is it going to be for mainly water transfer? You need to pick up an exorbitant amount of cash right there, and then the following year, for example, you pick up 75, and then at the end of the year you pay that down with the San Diego transfer money. Following year you do the same thing. There may be a couple years where the project that may be twice as big, and then it'll take 2 years worth of revenue from San Diego to pay that down. Now the challenge will always be, okay, you've spent it, now stop spending more than what the revenue will be bringing in from San Diego. Is that the path, or is that what you're trying to get at? It'd be nice for an explanation.
Well, my plan right now is, and it's just a plan. I only have $50 million of commercial paper available for the water department right now, and that pledge would be all net revenue of the department or the water department. So what I can envision, I don't know whether it would happen or not, is that, and we'd only do it if it made sense, is to use this new series of commercial paper, providing we can get a letter of credit that supports it, to fund the water system conservation projects on a short-term basis to limit the negative arbitrage associated with borrowing large sums of money at one time.
Kevin, with the business plan, I could see it developing, and this is what you guys were going for, or if it's different, where on the stuff that is not borrowed for water transfer, if you need $10 million for other items that the district needs to invest, whatever the case may be, because it is commercial paper, I'm hoping that you pay that back, and then you start your next project. Is that because I think are we going there where we want to do away with bonds in general?
No, we're
other than water transfer for that 185. But
well, for the water department, we don't have any planned borrowings other than for the water transfer. Now, for the energy department, we do have planned borrowings.
You can see the attachment here, the following page to the board memo. Has $35 million worth of distribution projects. And I think that question about nature of the funds where we have to come back to the board. Greg told me that we only got $6 million for capital projects and energy right now.
Yes, for 2012.
So the water part of this is a new wrinkle. The $200 million, you already have that capacity on the books. What he wants to do is to find a carrier for the other 75 to 100 million. Is that right?
Yes, and depending on what type of large projects come
And there's some question about whether such an animal even exists.
Yeah,
So-
but that has to be, whatever happens, it has to come back to this board
Right.
for the board to vote on it. All he's
Right.
doing is setting up a vehicle for the possibility of borrowing money if we need it, but that has to come before this board.
That's
And
correct.
we say yes or no to what he's trying to, but he's getting a vehicle ready to drive, so when we need to drive it, it's available for us. But we still say yes or no. So, he's just trying to move us ahead down the road and trying to progressively think about how to keep the road clear instead of having roadblocks in the road.
He is using commercial paper in a different way than we're used to.
Well, that's fine. That's why we have him as a CFO. He's a smart thinker.
Yeah. In moving you forward in your vehicle, then, I move to adopt the resolution.
Okay, it's been moved and second. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Brokey,
Yes.
if you had the revenue in your base rate, I mean, that's what's driving this. You're having to use commercial paper because the base rate isn't adjusted to meet the expenses.
Yes, as we discussed, I believe it was last week.
Last week.
So we're going to start looking at long-term indebtedness because it's not adjusted.
And the Unit 3 repower that we're finishing, how did we finance those? We did that through bonding?
Yes, we did a series of 3 refundings of commercial paper.
But by expanding, going from 100 million to 200 million, we'd have the flexibility, assuming that the board approved it, to immediately go in to do a larger water conservation project or even go in and build a new administration building.
Yes, it would certainly give you more options to issue larger debt for larger projects.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, please vote.
Thank you.
We have one last item. That's the transfer of personal and corresponding budgets on page 93. And Mr. Broken, I believe you have that too.
Yes, I do. I presented this last week as information. It's a transfer of an administrative assistant from the general manager's office into the water department, and then on the flip side, there's a transfer from administrative assistant from the government affairs into the general manager's office.
Yeah, this has been discussed in information last week, so I move for approval.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
Are these indirect costs, expenditures?
Pardon me?
Are these classified as indirect expenditures?
I would, yes, administrative and general expenditures.
No further draw down on either the water department or energy department, is that correct?
Well, they ultimately pay for all the administrative expenses.
But not in this budget year, right? I mean, it's neutral for the budget.
Overall, it's a neutral budget, yes.
Any other further questions? Please vote. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned. The next meeting is the 15th, next Tuesday at 1 p.m.